Stephen Edginton here from Westmonster, and I am reporting from Conservative Party Conference. Now, this fringe event that I'm just about to go into is actually not on the list of fringe events because they were banned by the Conservative Party. They are the People's Vote campaign. Now, they are speakers from Justine Greening, Anna Soubry, Philip Lee, and another MP who will be talking about why we need a second referendum, and they're all Conservative MPs or former MPs. So let's go and find out what they want and hopefully ask them a good question.
But what is it that is feared here? Is it because there's a threat that actually that this is getting some momentum, excuse the use of the word, this belief that actually that the public should be consulted again, that we shouldn't discuss it here at the Conservative Party conference? I tell you what really irritates me most is the suggestion, the hint, the implied thought that somehow I am less patriotic.
Here actually from other political parties. But I'm also aware that there are younger people here and there are older people here. There are men here and there are women here. And I will be blunt as I always am. I have been into our party's conference arena and I have seen, frankly, not enough women there, not enough of the more middle-aged and older people there, not enough brown faces there, and not enough black faces there either. Even though we voted to trigger Article 50, we said we would respect the result, and that is what we did. But goodness me, we have all of us been treated in a most appalling way. To be called an enemy of the people, as our great judges were, to be called traitors and mutineers. And I'm sorry to have to say this, but I think the leadership of our party stood by and allowed that to happen, and they should have called it out and condemned it for what it was.
The result of a second referendum that you're calling for, seeing as, Justine Greening, Neil Carmichael and Philip Lee all said before the first referendum that you would respect that result. And that is a lie, because you are calling for a second referendum because you lost. So why should anyone trust you to respect that second referendum and not call for a third referendum because you just didn't like the result?
That's a good question. Fair question.
Well, I think from my perspective, that's a bit like saying to somebody, you don't like the result voting in Tony Blair in 1997, so there should never be any other election in case people change their mind. I'd turn it back and say, actually, what's the problem with going back to check with people on a monumental, irreversible decision? And actually, anyone who actually wants to reflect the will of the British people, presumably, would have no problems with going back and double checking that the version of Brexit that's being proposed is the one that they want, and then comparing that to the alternative, which is, again, to stay exactly where they're at now. And I think if the Brexit... I personally have already said that I think this referendum should be binding. I mean, the last one, obviously, was seen as advisory, and we had a court case around all of that. But yeah, I do think it should be binding, and I think we've got to reach a conclusion on this. I think if the Brexiteers and Leavers had been able to agree on leave, then maybe we wouldn't be in this position. It's the continued argument between Brexiteers, in a sense, that has got us to where we've been. I'll be frank, I fully sat round the cabinet table, ready, willing and able to get on with this result. And I had hoped that the pieces could fall into place given we'd had that vote, but actually they haven't. And you can't just ignore that. And I'm still waiting for the pieces to fall into place, and they haven't. And that tells me that actually this is monumental. There are some challenges around it, and you have to go back and ask people if they're absolutely certain, given where we are now, whether that's really what they want to do. And given the fact that the Brexiteers themselves are now split into different camps. Something you can do checkers, and something you can't. So let's find out what people actually want.
So this is the last one.
In response, I've not voted at any point to stop the government proceeding with Brexit.
No, me neither.
No,
I don't think
even I have.
Exactly. I'm fully aware of what I'm on record saying, but allow me to stretch the medical analogy a bit. In 2016, the pathologist report came out to say there's this cancer. And then in 2018, the report gets, well, it's not actually a cancer anymore, it's benign. Do you proceed? I mean, the problem with this is that I'm not convinced at all that enough information was known about what Brexit entailed. I am not convinced the public understood that there could be a delay in getting access to medicines, that the way in which food was going to be produced, all of the complexity of it. I wasn't aware of everything. You know, and I'm paid to be aware of everything, aren't I? And I can honestly admit the detail, the complexity of our relationship, the fact that I am somehow bound by this referendum, that I cannot call for another act of democracy to get us out of this impasse, I find it's a nonsense, absolute nonsense.
Foreign Secretary yesterday was comparing the EU to the Soviet Union.
Shameful.
Well, in the Soviet Union, we know how democracy works. It's one person, one vote, once. I hope the UK is not going down that route.
Why should we trust you to respect the second one?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we've respected the first one. That's the whole point. We've gone through the process of trying to work this out. And guess what? The people who are the greatest advocates for it, they still cannot agree on what it means. I am no fan of referenda. I didn't want to have the first one. A prominent Brexiteer walks out on a meeting I was in just because I suggested that I thought it might end up like this. And 2 years on, it has ended up like this. If we have another referendum, I am praying it is the last time we have a referendum on a complex issue with a simple binary choice.
Like that impasse in Parliament, and if we reach that impasse in Parliament, I think it was an argument that Justine extremely well, which made it extremely well, that if we reach that point, well, where else do we go? And I think that that is something that is growing in people's minds.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help continue Westmonster's fight against the Remoaners, then please click the link in the description to donate and keep us going. We're getting outside the bubble and it would really help us out.